If you ever bullied someone, do you still sometimes think about how the person is now doing affected by your bullying? What did you do? I'm best friends with the guy I used to bully. It's not an excuse, but for context, I was going through extreme family issues with my dad at the time. I was never a bully, but the situation made me very bitter, and I ended up being a bully for a time. It started out as the good old I'm just joking, relax dude, and spiraled down into indisputable bullying. I would duck with him, duck with his stuff, say mean things. Thankfully I never got physical with him. Through all that, he was still genuinely pleasant to me. I guess one day after school, he noticed that I was walking to McDonald's instead of being picked up by my dad like usual, and he tagged along. He came up and asked why my dad wasn't picking me up this time. And I just lost my shit. I got emotional as heck. I was nearly crying in this man's arms. So we stopped halfway at the church, sat in the parking lot and talked. He listened to me. I cried some more. Some kids walked by. I joked that they were probably laughing at me for crying. D. Joked A. Duck M. Ignore M. That's what I did when you were being an asshole. We laughed and I gave him the most heartfelt apology of my life. He gladly accepted it and now I have a best friend to show for it. Also, my dad got the help he needed and continues to be an amazing father to this day, just like how he was before his issues. This could be a movie. Sorta bullied someone. Does it count as bullying if it was getting back at a bully in high school? To preface, I was a quiet kid and the guy bullying me was a dick, but it was apparent why. The parents were divorced, but still living together in a small dilapidated trailer on a farm. Both highly abusive. Both alcoholics and druggies. We got into a fight one day. Actual punches and shit. Neither of us really got anything serious on the other and we stopped. And I said, you ever think how your parents seemed to have split right around the time you were born? That was by far and large the worst thing I've ever said with a straight face. And I can tell it got to him, because he immediately unclenched his fists and walked out of the room. He didn't bully me after that, but it wasn't hard to see how badly it hurt him. I wasn't sure how tensions would be. I wanted to apologize, because I knew he was a chill guy at heart, and he just had a really awful home life. But I wasn't sure how he'd take it. I waited a couple months and apologized, and he accepted, and said he shouldn't have bullied me, but that my insult also helped him realize he needed to get out of there. I don't take that as a point of pride. Nobody should have to go through that shit alone, much less get insulted because of it. On a good note, we are actually good friends now and talk relatively often. He's doing much better than those days. He graduated college and landed a very well-paying job, and he seems to excel at it while being happy to boot. I wasn't directly involved, but I stood by as my brother and my at the time best friend bullied some poor kid one recess in 4th grade. He ended up moving away not long after. I still feel bad about it. That former best friend and the rest of my friend group ended up bullying me throughout middle school, then starting a rumor that led into high school and got to the point where people were calling me homophobic slurs based on a false rumor. I'm not sure I deserved all of that for being bystander, and I'm sure those people don't give two shits about how badly I'm doing. They never did. 4th grade is a really young age to have figured out how to stand up to bullies, especially when the bully is your own brother. You didn't deserve to be bullied because of that any more than he did. I once bashed an autistic kid into a locker because he wouldn't stop trying to talk to me. I regret it, and I feel bad about it, but it doesn't really have a lasting effect considering we are friends now. We talk about Nintendo and play Smash together. Play Smash together. The Nintendo kind or the lockers kind? Good joke. Took me a second. Nintendo. I'm hoping to get him some other games to play with me now that I'm starting my new job soon. I was on both ends of the spectrum. It's amazing what nasty little savages we truly are when you think about the bullying pecking order in school. The Nazi concentration camp system begins to make a lot more sense. I've had the opportunity to meet my bullies in the post-scholastic world and they apologized and honestly expressed embarrassment for their action. I've met people I had bullied and felt the same shame. What's interesting to me is that the bullies I've met along with myself didn't come from good families, and a lot of them weren't actually popular kids. In fact, the popular kids did come from good families, were nice people, and attractive, had a thing. Yeah, I remember them. I was able to find one of them years later and apologize for what I did when I was still in school, and she accepted my apology. I didn't have the chance to apologize to the others, but just recently saw some of them on social media and they look like they are doing great. They look genuinely happy. I would be lying if I said I'm happy for them, but I guess that's why they're up there and I'm still down here. 1000% I unfortunately have a pretty bad personality disorder and struggle greatly controlling my emotions. Frequently sabotaged relationships in fear of abandonment, etc. Had this girl in a summer class when I was around 13. Was super sweet and I think liked me. Had an episode where I said something very mean to her. I wish I could recall what, but it wasn't warranted and immediately hurt her. She got up and walked away without saying anything or acting, and I never saw her again. Still tears me up inside. Why did I do that? I didn't bully anyone. However, I have regrets about all the times I could have stepped in and stood up for someone else being bullied. It would have been a little thing for me to do at the time and may have had a positive influence on their life. It hit me harder after I had my own children. A guy I knew had a bad speech impediment. All of his friends, including me, would make jokes at his expense. He laughed along. But looking back, I think it probably made him feel like shit. I think this is the biggest misconception about bullies. Most don't know they're bullies. They think that their actions aren't harmful because he's my friend, or I was just being funny. I didn't bully anybody, but was bullied myself. I moved to a new high school in 9th grade, so I didn't really have any friends. The small town where we were didn't accept outsiders. If you weren't born and raised there and didn't have an important recognizable family name, you weren't cool. I was small, short, hadn't gotten boobs yet, and barely 90 pounds soaking wet, almost 5 foot at the time. There was the usual name calling, pushing books out of my arms. But 4 boys made my entire high school career miserable. At lunch, they would sit down across from me. I sat at a table by myself, just moved. No friends placed their chins in their hand and oink at me. This lasted for about a month before I stopped eating at school. They would also find me after school had ended, hold me down, open up the stapler so it was flat, and slam it into my arm as I begged and pleaded with them to stop. Then they would mock me while I sobbed quietly and pulled all the staples out of my arms. They did a lot more than that to me, but the staples were probably the most hurtful. One of them found me after graduation working at a grocery store as a cake decorator. He asked me to write on a cake for his dad's birthday, even though I knew I was safe. My heart raced in fear at the thought of what they used to do to me. I wrote what he asked, and he hung around for a little while after that, not really saying anything, but spending a long time looking at donuts and pastries. Then I didn't see him anymore. I took my lunch break and sat in the area near the bathrooms with tables that were there for the employees to eat at. In walks my bully and sits down at the table next to me. I let out a long sigh, looked away, and set my sandwich down, expecting more abuse. He told me he didn't know how to say it, but he was sorry. I was floored. Never expected that out of any of them. Without saying anything, I just listened as he spoke. He said that he never forgot the things they did to me and that it haunted him. He said he wished he could go back in time and fix it. He wanted to apologize. I told him that I had thoughts of suicide in school because of what they did. They made me believe that I wasn't worth anything, useless, worthless. I believed I wasn't deserving of love. It ducked me up for a long time. He said his mother told him once that if you drop a plate on the floor and it breaks, you can say sorry all you want, but it doesn't fix the plate. He thought of me when he thought of that. He said he thought of me often, and when he saw me, he wanted to apologize, but he knew it didn't fix anything. We talked for a few minutes and I could tell I broke his heart with what I had felt after he participated in the bullying. Too long didn't read I got bullied. He felt bad. I didn't bully her as such, but I was definitely not kind to her, and I was horrible about her behind her back. I messaged her in our early 30s and apologized for anything I had said or done to upset her or make her feel bad. Explained that I was having undiagnosed mental health problems and that I wasn't just insecure, but she represented everything I wanted to be. I got a reply back that said she hadn't even realized I didn't like her, but that what I said made sense as to why I felt that way. Even thought she thought it was weird as shit that out of all the cool people we went to school with, it was her that I wanted to be like. We are still in contact and often use each other as an example of how you can never tell what someone is really thinking. I was sort of in this weird situation that the new girl at school started copying one of my friend's clothes, books, music, hobbies, etc. So after telling her off a couple of times and a visit to the school counselor without any change, that friend started bullying her. I just sort of stood by and didn't really get involved, but it still made me feel really guilty. A few years after graduating, I ran into that girl and just had a normal friendly conversation with her. I also mentioned that I cut that friend off after graduating in hopes that it would make her feel better. By now I feel pretty okay with the whole thing. The girl got a good job after graduating, so I think she's doing better now. Yes, I was an immense asshole as a child. Bullied a kid for his weight, others as well, but I was especially cruel to him. Because of this and other problems I got into, I changed schools. Went through a lot of bullying on the school I changed to, but I guess I deserved it. It still haunts me mentally until today, so I can only imagine how the boy I bullied feels. I think often about him. Even saw him once at a bus stop, but I was so ashamed that I just looked away. Along with a couple of adults who knew better and did more harm, it arguably ruined her childhood. Here's what happened. When this girl was 5 years old, call her Sarah, she and her father were in a serious auto accident and were both hospitalized for at least a week afterward. Mother went to visit them because mom was an officer on the board of directors for our church. Mom made me wait in the lobby at the hospital. As mom explained it, children weren't allowed above the first floor of the hospital because children had germs. I'd been bossy towards Sarah because I was 4 years older than her. In a typical kid way, thought being bigger and older made me right and didn't care if she didn't want to go along with my plans. If she cried, I was indifferent. Adults were usually indifferent when I cried, so I thought that was fair. When Sarah recovered enough to go to Sunday school again, I was the same little shit to that girl. Sarah didn't deserve it, and I really didn't have enough empathy to care. What I didn't realize until 2 years later was why mom had made up that lie about the hospital visitor policy. Of course children were allowed to visit patients. Mom was already having an affair with Sarah's married father. She didn't want me in the room in case he was delirious and said something. When I was 12, I got up for a glass of water one night and saw mom and Sarah's father naked on our living room floor. By that time I was slightly less of a shit and felt horrible for Sarah and her mother. Was mature enough to recognize the affair wasn't my fault, but had zero clue what to do about it. So I avoided Sarah and her mother and never spoke to either of them again. Within a year after that, Sarah's parents divorced. Looked for Sarah on social media as an adult with an intention of sending a written apology. Couldn't find her. She may have changed her name when she married. We no longer have any acquaintances in common, so there's no realistic chance of getting the message across unless she sees this comment. Sarah, I'm sorry for my part in that nightmare. My bully reached out to me and apologized a decade later. Reverse rule of 3. I was bullied in childhood, so now I have to bully thrice as much to feel avenged. Not me personally, I refused to vote, but my HS class sophomore year voted as a cruel joke the uncool girl as homecoming queen. She was the only one who wasn't in on the joke. The saddest thing is, when I see reunion pics of mostly the popular kids, she is always with them, still not realizing that awful joke. I have thought about posting on my HSFB, but I doubt anyone will admit to it. A few years ago, a guy came up to me in the street calling me Paul. My name's not Paul. He seemed really happy to see me. It took a few moments, but I realized this was one of my school bullies from when I was 8 or 9. He seemed to think we were old friends catching up on the good times, as if all had been forgiven. You were never a friend, you cunt.